Hey everyone, welcome back to my coverage of the 2021 World Chess Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Game 7 was an uneventful draw, so we're going to jump right into Game 8. Before we talk about the game, I just want to thank everyone for all the support from my channel. We're already at over 30 subscribers, which is amazing, moving towards my goal of 100 subscribers. If you haven't already done so, I'd really appreciate it if you can click that subscribe button. Also, don't forget to like and comment if you have any questions or comments about the games in general. So in this game, Magnus had the white pieces, and he chooses the e4, and it's interesting because he hadn't really gotten anything against Jan in game 4, but since the match situation has changed now after the marathon win in game 6, Magnus leads by a point. He can actually afford to just draw more games. The Petrov is a more solid opening. The Petrov is a setup after knight f6. And Magnus is okay with draws. If they draw all the way through, Magnus retains the title. So the onus is on Jan to win one game. So interesting practical decision by Magnus. We'll see how it turns out. Magnus decides to go for d4 in game 4 when the Petrov was played. Magnus actually took on e5. So Magnus is the first to deviate from the previous game. And we get this position here where Magnus chooses knight d2, which is a rare move. Previously, if we check the database, we can see that castling is the main move. If White tries to do something similar to what Magnus did in the game here, Black actually has this very nice tactical motif where you can simply castle and ignore the threat to e4. So after knight e4, d4, bishop e4, Black actually has this important fork after bishop takes h2, king takes h2, queen h4 check. And black actually recovers the material, and we have an equal position. So Magnus cleverly decides to change the move order. Instead of castling first, he decides to play knight d2. So now if Black tries to do something like this, there's just no threat because the rook defends the pawn and white can just capture on e4. So Jan is pretty much forced to take on d2, and here he decides to keep the symmetry and play bishop d6. Magnus castles. If Black now castles, White actually has this move queen h5, attacking, threatening checkmate in 1, and also attacking d5. Black is forced to play f5, but this weakens the dark squares, specifically e5. Play would continue something like bishop g5, queen e8, bring the rook towards the open file. First queen f3, attacking d5, bring the rook towards the open file, and now exchange dark square bishops. And after something like bishop f4, queen f4, you can see that all of these dark squares can be infiltrated, and White's going to have a very promising position. So this is exactly what Black doesn't want. Instead, Jan plays this what Fabiano called a fascinating move, h5. This is an example of what chess players call prophylaxis. Jan understood that the queen wants to go to h5. He understood what his opponent's idea was, and he simply decides to stop it. And this actually confused Magnus, who went into a 40-minute think. This was the longest think he had in this entire match. And in the end, he chose this sort of queen e1 check. We see the clock go from 1:56 to 1:15, and Jan had called this a silent draw. He knew that if queen e7, White is going to trade queens, and pretty soon this game will peter out to a draw. But for some reason, Jan was of the opinion that playing king f8 would also lead to a draw. And if you watch my game 6 video, I did highlight that it seemed that Jan had this tendency to steer the game towards complications. He always wanted to play the more complicated move. It was almost like he detested simplifications. And in some sense, it almost feels like Magnus understood this. And he even said that he thought that there was a possibility that Jan would play king f8. And that's what ended up happening. So Magnus is definitely a brilliant psychologist, but it must also be said that as I said before, Magnus is not opposed to draws. So his decision to play queen e1 was rewarded. I should mention that Magnus had also said that his brain was fried at this point. He said that he was trying to calculate. He couldn't really calculate variations, so he's pretty much okay with the draw at this point. But after king f8, Magnus suddenly understands that white has a better position after bishop b4. You're simply going to trade this important bishop off, and again that theme of attacking the dark squares comes back. So after that inaccuracy, white has the better position. The main problem right now is that black's rook is out of play, and black needs to coordinate his pieces. So he tries to bring the rook in through this rook lift, making use of h5. But after queen g5, this rook can't move over just yet because this pawn needs to be protected. So Jan first plays c6 to free up the queen from protection of his pawn and preparing a queen f6. After rook e8, bishop e8, rook e1, queen f6, queen e3, bishop d7, h3, we get to a very interesting moment. So Fabiano had called this move h3 fascinating. One reason is that he illustrated the following line with queen d6, preparing this rook e6. Again, you go back to g5 to pin the rook to this pawn. If queen f6, you go back to g3, threatening to go to b8. Black stops this, and again threatens to trade queens. And now you have this move rook e5. And the point is, after something like rook e6, you can just take the pawn. And now because of the pawn on h3, rook e1 check, your king can escape to h2. So it shows, the deep h3 seems like such a innocuous move, but Magnus, there's always some poison. And of course, if you play something like f6, white has this discovered check, picking up the queen. So f6 blocks the rook from protecting the queen. So all these small tactics in the position matter. So after h3, Jan played h4. I was also looking at the excellent commentary by Gary Kasparov and Matthew Sadler. Gary Kasparov is, of course, the 13th world champion and former trainer of Magnus, and just one of the greatest players of all time. Matthew Sadler is a very strong grandmaster from England, so it's very interesting to see how they looked at this position. They suggested g5, which is a very nice move. Whenever you see a pawn on h3, it is natural to want to take advantage of that weakness. And another point of g5 is it creates space for the king. Similar to how h3 created space for the white king, g5 creates space for the black king. And it would sort of make Jan's previous play make more sense. But instead he played h4, which wasn't the best. And now after d takes c4, this was sort of where things started to go wrong for Jan. When you play d takes c4, bishop takes c4, you're putting the bishop on an even better square. Here, it's sort of hitting nothing. It's sort of hitting air. But then after c4, it's directed right at f7, right towards the black king. Black has to be very careful here. I think with Matthew Sadler, he had an interesting suggestion of queen d8. The point is, you're just trying to get the rook into the game. But as Gary Kasparov had said, for a human to make a backwards move like that, this already shows that things are getting quite difficult for black. Jan plays d takes c4, bishop takes c4, and then here he just completely blundered. After b5, this actually shocked the entire chess world. Although it has to be said that things are much more difficult now. Black had to play this move king g8, and even here, it's not exactly clear what's happening. After something like queen e7, black would play bishop e6, queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes e6, and going into this pawn ending is quite dangerous. White has a better pawn structure, and it is not exactly, you have to calculate this perfectly, and it could be just lost. Black would probably have to take back with the pawn, and after rook e1, rook h6, white again has the better ending, but this would have been better than what happened in the game. What happened in the game was that Jan simply what he said was that he saw this check and queen takes a7, but he forgot that at the end, his own bishop is hanging here. So this was the biggest blunder of the match so far. He just simply lost the pawn. And the rest of the game, there's not too much to say. I think the only thing I wanted to talk about was how Magnus converted this queen ending. It's very instructive. One of the most important things in queen endings is you want to centralize your queen, and we see that Magnus always made sure to keep his queen towards the center. Another important concept is you don't want to hurry in the end game. In the end game, it's important not to rush. And we see that Magnus, he decides to first play queen to c3, thinking that he's guarding the checks, but then he realizes that the queen's better on d1, supporting the push of this passed pawn. So the pawn's going up the board, and Yan is just trying some desperation. He could have resigned much earlier, but he was definitely upset about throwing away another game. And finally, after queen f3, he resigned. So maybe just what I wanted to point out was, and looking at Kasparov and Sadler's commentary, what was interesting was just that how resilient Black's position was, even after various inaccuracies. The position could still be defended. For example, with g5, the position could still be defended. And then here after c4, there's queen d8, and even after taking on c4, you still had this move king g8, trying to hold the balance. But once you play b5, the game's just over. So with that, Magnus takes the lead 5-3. There's just 6 games left, and they had a rest day after this game, and soon they're gonna start game number 9. And I did watch a press conference of after this game, and what I found it refreshing how Yan was talking about his chances. While everyone is saying that the match is effectively over, he had the right mindset, saying that before his game he still had to win. He still needed to beat Magnus, so that hasn't changed. So he's still gonna have to beat Magnus. Instead of 1 game, he has to win 2 games. So I think he just looks at it as sort of like that first game is what he needs. So that's sort of the barrier. So it's going to be very, very fascinating to see what happens in game 9. I'm rooting for Nepo. I think he has played a good match. He's definitely has a deep understanding of chess. And yeah, as a chess fan, I want to see excitement. I think he's definitely good enough to beat Magnus. One thing maybe I haven't mentioned before was that before going to this match, he actually had a positive record against Magnus. One of the few players that has that plus record against Magnus. So he has the confidence to beat him. He's done it before, but now is the time for him to do it. So I'm actually gonna go and I'm gonna predict Yan Nepomniachtchi win. I know that the odds are against me, but I'm going to try to speak it into existence that Yan will win. I think he's going to go for e4 again. I think it's going to be a Roy Lopez again. I don't think he's going to deviate. I think that, I think, we're going to see another Spanish. He's gone in good positions against it. I think he's going to... I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow. So thanks again for watching the recap. One thing I wanted to do was I actually want to share this lead chess study. I know I went through it pretty quickly. I didn't go through all the variations that I have in the study. I wanted to try something where we keep the video a bit more concise, and then for those interested, you can delve into the lead chess study. I highly recommend you to get a lead chess account if you haven't already done so. I'll put the link to the study in the description, and you can always clone the study. I think you click the share button and then you can click this clone. and then you can play around with this game and the analysis. And yeah, again, please leave any comments if you have questions, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, and I'll be back with the Game 9 recap.